Say how to implement malloc in WebAssembly. So that natively there isn't malloc in WebAssembly. Mscripted, this is what you're using, is not just the C++ to WASM compiler, but a complete toolchain that includes a web runtime and its own libc, specifically designed for running C++ programs with minimal source code modifications. Mscripted libc is a heavily modified fork of muscle. It implements and emulates a wide range of C libraries, including malloc and SBRK. So natively, WebAssembly doesn't have anything like BRK. That's all implemented in this higher level Mscripted runtime. So again, it gets down to that point that I think the way WebAssembly works at the lowest level, you have to request a static amount of memory to run your page in, and then dynamically allocate from that.
Yeah, because I use them. I import a SQLite from I can import as big as I want. If I just make a really big one, it just goes really slow.
Right, but that's because Mscripted is saying, I think before you started, I need this much memory to dynamically allocate for SQLite. And I think if you run that, like if you had to test, we could actually do it. If you go about memory in Chrome memory rather, Chrome memory, about memory, Chrome memory URL, I forget what it's all on there. Yeah. It doesn't show. This isn't the one I want. Maybe it's under the regulated by rules. Anyway, this is just something, I'm just talking about some stuff you may want to be careful with when you're running this. Because I've ran into these problems before. What's up? Oh, jeez, really? It's gonna be boring. Thanks for pointing that out. There we go. Okay, so I think this tells you here. Might not actually show unless I'm on something like this website. Alright, we'll just play around with this and then we'll have an actual example.
There's a way to test.
There's a way to test what?
You can leak it to it, then what happens, and then you can just create a human with SQLite data as big as possible.
Yeah, go ahead. Can you link the demo in the Discord channel?
Huh?
Can you drop the demo link in the Discord? We'll take a look at it. But until then, let's do this. Let's go down here to Rust. And we're going to do getting started. And the first thing we have to do is install the WebAssembly toolchain. So I'm going to make this really big. We're going to run that. And what do you know, it's already up to date. Now, because WebAssembly is such a fast-moving thing, I'm going to run Rust up first. And I'm going to do it's Rust up. Rust up. And I'm going to download the latest version of Rust. I'm going to download the version from December 15th. So when you install with Rust up, what you should really do if you're going to get into WebAssembly, rather than using like a distro version, is run this thing called Rust up update kind of regularly. This will recompile the entirety of Rust for you. Like there's Cargo, Clippy, Rust Standard, Rust C, Rust Format. And why that's really necessary is because the WebAssembly stuff with Rust is moving so fast that it's quite possible and probable that you'll encounter a bug that was fixed last week. You know, there's just so many bugs in the system. I mean, you got to take into account like the amount of people actually using this. There are like 2 development libraries for this, I guess. You and the one that was just mentioned. So there's really not much penetration with this technology yet. So now I'm on Rust 1.6.65.0 nightly. And I'm going to go ahead and rerun this stuff here and make sure that it still says up to date. It does. I'm going to go ahead and install the trunk. Trunk is the recommended, yes, okay. So before this tool called Trunk came out, what you used to have to do is compile your WebAssembly stuff inside of a container that was made explicitly for compiling WebAssembly. There was a huge hack. So it was like an Alpine container, and you would jump in the Alpine container, you'd mount your local directory, and then the Alpine container had the build tools to build WebAssembly. And that was just because actually making it work across the board with everyone's stuff was very difficult. So they created this tool called Trunk, and Trunk is a tool that is generally useful in Rust for cross-compiling to different platforms. So you may use Rust if you're cross-compiling something like Atmel. If you want to run like Rust on an embedded chip for robotics, you may use Trunk for all different types of things.
Love when I get the game Rust instead of language Rust.
So this is their web application. This isn't actually what I thought it was. I'm thinking the thing that I think is, well, I don't know, it's called Rust Cross. Yes, this is what I was thinking.
We're lost, so we're going.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is like a very geeky topic.
Yeah.
WebAssembly is like a way to run Rust inside of the browser. So you're compiling Rust into like a native machine language, and you're running it in the browser. But before you can get it up and working, you got to go do some pretty boring loops. So I'm waiting for this to finish compile. But yeah, very cool. Hope to catch you next time. Maybe we'll be doing something a little easier.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cheers.
Oh, so this is all in the realm of web development, isn't it?
This is in the realm of making Rust work inside of the browser. So Rust is like a compiled language. It's like C, C++.
Yeah.
These languages are meant to run on the architecture themselves. Now the great thing about these languages is when you write C for like an Intel machine, someone has changed the compiler, and they may take that same code and run on something else that's not an Intel machine, right? Like for instance, one of those new Apple Macs that run on RISC architecture. If you've heard about that in the news, they've changed it. They got away from Intel.
Yeah, they started developing their own like CPU or something.
Exactly. So you have a different compiler, and you have the same code, and the new compiler says, I'm going to build this code natively for this different chipset. This is a very old method of designing code that people got away from in like the 80s and in the 90s. And people are now returning to it because the theories around types and compilation are so much more advanced than they were then, that now we can do it right. And this is giving us a lot of advantages. So basically, what they've done is the people that are creating JavaScript looked at the problems they were facing, and they eventually just said, maybe it would be better if we implemented a software processor inside the browser. And then the question comes up, okay, well, what kind of instructions will that software processor execute, right? And the answer to that is the software processor is called WebAssembly, right? And we just call it the chipset, the instructions that they execute is also WebAssembly. So you have inside of your browser the ability to execute code as if it was an actual CPU natively. And this whole process is WebAssembly. Now, this is interesting because this gets you around from having to like parse actual code that you send across the line as text. So now it actually just sees instructions and it can parse them, run them. But getting there is difficult, and this is all because this is a new technology. So there's some areas it's not even faster, which are just amazing to me. It should be faster than everything. But
That's why you're saying you're reading this book and hoping that it just evolves further down the line.
Yeah.
Because this is all brand new.
I mean, it's
Newer.
yeah. I believe under the hood, WebAssembly is still calling like certain JavaScript like browser libraries, and that's why it's still slow.
It is a fast moving thing. I believe Google Earth is now one assembly application.
Really?
Yeah, and there's quite a few of them that are like that. I think Discord is actually WebAssembly too, or has it WebAssembly behind it. Yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me.
It's just a mirroring on both compatible WebAssembly and native C. WebAssembly, the training runs around 4 times slower.
Yeah.
So I take that benchmark. So WebAssembly is around 4 times slower than native.
Right, which is actually, while that sounds horrible, amazingly fast, right? Because JavaScript is how much slower? I mean, did you have the same benchmark available in JavaScript?
Well, I guess I could compile it to ASM.
Yeah, that would be
I'm
great.
sorry, it's not WebAssembly. It's JavaScript. I compiled it to ASM.js. And ASM.js is 4 times slower.
ASM is a totally different thing entirely. So my assumption is that WebAssembly would also be around 4 times slower, but that regular JavaScript is probably hundreds of times slower, right? So if you look at like a language benchmark shootout, you can see the difference. I don't know if you've ever seen these before. Here's an example of a language benchmark shootout. This is a very popular one, the computer benchmark scan. You can say, like here, C, and then you want to compare C against, let's see here, fastest CPU. Let's do GCC. Let's come out here to JavaScript, and then JavaScript versus C. So you can see here the comparison. Here's GCC up at the top, right? And then there's Node.js below. So in this example, Node.js takes 85 times the memory, and it runs over 5 times slower. So from 8.26 seconds CPU time to 44 seconds CPU time. So there you go. So here's regex redux. So this takes us from C, which is running in 152 megs in 2 seconds, to Node, which is running in 1 gig in 6 seconds. So it's 3 times slower, and it takes up, 6 to 7 times as much memory. But yeah, I mean that's the point. The point is that there's speed advantages in the games when we're trying with it. All right, so now what we're going to do here is we're going to use the starter template. Project name. Let's give it a name, HLUG test. This is really cool. I didn't know that there was a cargo generate kit, and I could do that. Oops. Unknown variable. Okay, well, I don't think that's supposed to happen. Error replacing placeholders. Oh, really? Yeah. As I said, there's a lot of words in this system.
Doesn't happen to be a folder in your directory called HLUG, is there?
So this is what it's view trunk minimal template. Error replacing placeholders. Let's see what this template has. Source. Here's what it looks like there. And it's saying error replacing placeholders. So what I do is I'll check for that. There we go. So, is there another branch? Let's check. No. No tags. So I think that we should do here is go cargo generate. Oh, and then their template values.
And then you clone the repo, and then make the read,
Yeah, but I mean, I'd rather know why this isn't working. I think that this directory project name git from config use the configuration file. I think that what we could do is, let's check this out. Cargo. That's interesting. Cargo generate git. Okay, then let's just do this. Let's just create a template values file. Pair reducing field values at line 1. Yeah, but why? Why not? Integer type 0. Expected a key map of value keys value. Oh, maybe this is what it wants. Hold on. Why is this so cool? Okay. So let's just ignore that. Let's do this one. Cargo new you let's try that. And then we're going to jump into UApp. We're going to go cargo run. We're going to edit the cargo total file and put this stuff in there. Cargo add view.
Do the feature flag too. And do CSR for client-side rendering?
Yeah. What is hydration?
I don't know. And it's the only feature flags they have are CSR, SSR, and hydration now.
Yeah. And then we run this code right here.
Yeah,
Did you get this working?
Yeah, I have that working.
And then, so the rest of this tutorial works, just the one thing we started that doesn't.
Yep.
Did you get it, did you try the one thing that we can't get to work?
No, I went straight to setting the app manually for some reason. I didn't even read the.
Well, nothing wrong with that, that's further right.
The only other thing you have to do, I think, is add an index.
If that's all this took, this is substantially easier than the first time I tried this. Cargo, run. Oh, trunk serve, nice. Okay, so now there's a server listening to its address. And then there's our WebAssembly. So this is running this bundle, which it made right up there. And then there's the preload right there. So that's the JavaScript boot. That's the JavaScript, I don't know, is it bindings? I guess, yeah. It looks like bindings. Binds that. So we have probably a couple hundred lines of JavaScript that it has to package. And then we have this. And I think the question now should be like, okay, how big is this thing? Let's go over here. Yeah, that would be another way to do it. That's probably a better way to do it, actually. So it's 1.5 megabytes of WebAssembly to create that little effect. So you can see that this is not like a very efficient method of creating a very small counter.
Yeah. I wonder how that number scales with complexity of the application.
Well, this is also the development build, so maybe if we do trunk serve release, it'll give us a better one. There we go. And now we are down to 304 kilobytes.
That's a lot better.
Way better, right? Which is still a ton of code for that.
Yeah.
But, and now it's even faster. So,
SQL is around 10 megabytes.
yeah. Well,
And WebAssembly.
yeah, with the WebAssembly. But interestingly enough, there's a Rust version of SQLite. It's a key value stored in Rust as SQL. I think it has a SQL extraction layer to it too. Have you heard of that?
I saw it, yeah. I've seen SQLite buttons for it.
No, I wouldn't use SQLite's bindings for Rust. I would use a native SQLite that's written in Rust. Right? If you don't have to have SQLite, exactly, do you need to have SQLite? Or do you just need to solve the same problem?
It's also user interchange for me.
Okay, so you actually have something that's already writing data in SQLite like that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, because like there's Rust.
It's like a wire. This is like data transfer from around the wire. I just transfer SQLite files over the wire between.
When you mean, yeah, I know what you're talking about, the binary data dump. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, I wouldn't rely on that, but sure, that's good. I would instead, I mean, I don't know, let me see this one. There's I don't know if it's binary compatible.
For example, like in doing classification in for different stocks in the stock market. The data set has around like 20 tables. It's just convenient to like store all that as a SQLite file. And then just transfer, and just send the whole thing over the server. For visualizing data, instead of like getting only part of the data that's necessary for visualizing, I get the entire data set.
Sure. I mean, I guess the question is just, how would that be different if you weren't using SQLite? If you still have, if you're the one producing the data?
So in the SQLite, over the wire format, the data set is around 19 megabytes.
Well, why would that be any different?
But if it was like in JSON format, it would like 100 megabytes or something.
Yeah, but I'm not saying you should use JSON, I'm saying
And
like.
also while I'm doing the visualization, I'm doing a lot of joins. The data set, it's not only for message passing large data set, data dump. It's also once you get the data dump, you can really start using it with joins. Like you don't have to write program joins.
Yeah, but if you're using, like, if you're in an enterprise, right, and you're transferring data, you're streaming data into a database, you're not going to be using SQLite for that, right?
You can export it as CS. Yeah, I guess it's another data you first transform to CS.
You don't even have to, I mean, you can use Kafka or whatever, right? I'm just saying there's thousands of different ways to ingest data at blazing fast speeds in bulk quantities with different formats. I mean, there's no reason to use SQLite for it. I'm not saying you can't use SQLite for it, I'm just saying it's just
For the front-end visualization, instead of making a bunch of HTTP requests for various data, for different kinds of data, all the different data that's needed to do graphs.
yeah, you just have the dump.
Just make one data request for a dump.
Sure, right. I understand that the value in providing a dump. I just don't understand the value of the dump being SQLite.
How we get the dump from Kafka? You have
Kafka can take it to dump from anything. I mean, like Kafka's the Java high data speed ingestion stuff. So like the fastest method of getting data into a database that's an enterprise, because no one's going to be using SQLite in the enterprise for backend, right?
No, I'm talking about the front end. I want to do some visualization. I don't want to make a bunch of like 5 or 20 API requests, get all the data, the graph and stuff. I just want to make one HTTP request, and that's usually just a SQLite data. One data request, it has all the data I need in SQLite data on the browser, on the front end.
I mean, you're predicating it in a SQLite data dump. If you're saying in a SQLite data dump, keep doing what you're doing. If you're opening up to like it not being a SQLite data dump, there's lots of other interchange formats for data that you can use.
On the front end.
Sure, on the front end, that compress very high, that include multiple different tables, right? Like for one, like the GIST world, we won't use SQLite. We use the ArcGIS stuff, which is GDB. I'm just saying like that's got hundreds of tables and it can include cities and states and all that kind of stuff. So there's different formats that people dump databases in for that purpose. SQLite is one format.
So once you get that thing on your browser, how do you parse it?
With
How do you read it
a
on the
data
browser?
driver that the browser supports. You know, there's different data drivers that.
So you have to have a tool. You have to create a tool on your browser for that thing. A SQLite, all you need is just a SQLite binder, and you can start using the data on your browser.
Sure, yeah. I got that. You know, there's advantages there because it's been accepted as like part of HTML5. No doubt. I think that is a sizable advantage too.
Yeah. So once I get ArcGIS once I get a data ArcGIS dump on my browser, like how do I read it and turn it into do an array graph?
Well, in the case of WebAssembly, right, you're providing a client that does the same thing. So you have like a thin client that provides the same type of capabilities, whether it's not you want SQL abstraction or you want something like a true object model. You know, like that's another method of doing things. Like the Mongo method of navigating SQL looks nothing like SQLite. I'm not saying that's a better method. I'm just saying
So you have to write in code for parsing and everything.
you don't have to write it, someone else wrote it for you. You just have to provide the query.
How do I create the ArcGIS on the data on the front end?
Using their library, their SDK.
I run the SDK on my browser,
Yes, that's exactly.
and it's dynamic. I can dynamically run queries on it.
Yes. There you go. ArcGIS Maps SDK for JavaScript 4.25 and later. WebGL extensions and now WebGL servers. So for the all
Yeah,
their
we got, like the query and like a text editing.
yeah. This is like your client-side queries right there. That's what their query system looks like. Feature CSV, GeoJSON layer, WFS. So it supports all of these different layer views, and you have query features, query extents, query feature count, query objects ID. I'm just saying there's a lot of different vendors that have slated this dragon differently. You know. Anyway, so the question now is, what are we doing? I'm sorry. We're looking at the U. So with the U stuff, there should be different examples inside of U. Have you played any of their examples, Josh, while we've been talking?
Yeah, so I've just been going through the tutorial page on the website. It's not exactly this one. Keep scrolling through this. There's one of them's called tutorial. That's where I started. Let's see, u.rs/doc/tutorial. That's what I've been going through.
We take a look at what can use U to build web applications. U is a modern Rust framework for building front-end web apps using WebAssembly. U encourages a reusable, maintainable, and well-structured architecture. What are we going to build? Intergalactic gathering of the Rust community happens annually. I went to RustConf. I would not say that it lived up to that statement. It was actually really bad. I will not be going there. It was actually really weird.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was the,
Where was it?
well, because the Rust community tends to be like the most social community of all programmers. But the politics of it are just so cringe. Like, the politics of a lot of different programming communities is slowly moving cringe, but the Rust community has like, you know, jumped ahead on the cringe to an obscene level. So, you know, they don't have like, they don't have introductions on their Discord at all. There's no like side channel for you to like talk to other people. There's no like face-to-face chatting or any of that kind of thing. And the reason is because it's hard to moderate. You know? That's what they say.
Yeah.
And I'm like, look, if you're an adult and you want to talk to another adult, there should be a place for you to have that conversation, regardless of whether or not you can moderate it. If for no other reason than because when you pay to join the conference like that, it's like $200, right? The seat count paid for everyone to join, which is a lot of money for everyone to join. And you kind of think that, okay, if you're going to join a digital conference and you're not going to make those types of things available, then why would you even bother with it? Just watch the YouTube videos when you're done.
Yeah.
Like, I joined a digital conference to make connections, and that Rust conference was absolutely denied every form of making connections because they want to make sure that all of the spaces are like safe space and yada yada yada. So I'm like, you know, it was the most antisocial conference I've ever been to.
That sucks.
Pearl was more social than RustConf. Cargo install trunk. We did that. We did this. Wait, is this the same thing?
No, it's a little different, but a lot of the steps are the same. Like, one of the things I noticed is when they have you do trunk serve, they have you do trunk serve open.
Gotcha.
And they start you with a hello world, and you just kind of like build from there.
Okay, let's do that then. I like that idea.
It brings you through like some components and stuff like
There
that.
you go. So this is actually pretty good. And by the way, we can actually go through this too. We can take a look at how this is working. So you render app new render. This is actually calling this guy up here, right? So what we're doing is we're taking urender, and this is called the turbofish, right? So you've seen the turbofish before?
Yes.
We're saying we want urender to essentially be of type app, and then we're calling on it new and render. And what that is doing is we're providing you to it, right? What that is doing is it's calling this guy up here, setting the state. Hold on, I don't even know, where is uState different? That's a really good question. Okay, so there's gotta be something in U then for that at his U state. Let's see.
Is he getting it from Prelude?
Perhaps. U state and U functional. U functional, U state. This hook is designed to manage state in a function component. This hook will always trigger a re-render upon receiving a new state. See U state EQ if you want the component to only re-render when the new state compares unequal to the existing one. Okay, so this is going to create a state, and every time we modify this state, it's going to force everything to be re-rendered. So this type that this thing is returning, which is essentially this over here, something that implements hook and use state handle. This type, every time it's modified, is going to force a re-rendering of that component. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Remember when I said use a graphical framework for WebAssembly?
Mm-hmm.
It's not required to run WebAssembly in the browser. But if you want to run graphical stuff with WebAssembly, you need a piece of functionality that says when this changes, re-render it. And this thing that is rendered matches to this component. And you handles all of that.
Yeah.
So here's how what they're doing here. They're saying that this function state is returning HTML. Internally, it has this use state thing, counter. And then we're implementing it down here. This is how it should render. So HTML is a macro that specifies how it renders. And inside of the HTML macro, we have literal HTML. And we call here on click. So these curly braces specify what function to call when you click them. So this is actually this functional block right up here, right? And it's labeled as increment value. And the difference here is that this specifies what happens when we're clicking it, and this one is in quotes. So this specifies, I think, what the button is supposed to read on this one. And then down here is something else that's shown below it. It's going to specify the current value, and it's going to specify the increment, right? So this is going to dereference.
Why does increment value need to be in curly braces? Like with normal HTML, couldn't you just write like plain text with increment value?
That's a good question, and I think that is totally a valid point. Here's my assumption though. My assumption is that all of these are creating components under the hood that map into a DOM tree. Okay. And then in order to create a text component that maps into a DOM tree, you're going to use the curly brackets and the double quotes.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
So while all of this looks like it's just HTML, it's not. It's actually telling Rust, create a component for this, create a component for that, in the DOM tree. And this is also what JavaScript libraries do.
JSX and stuff. Yeah.
Precisely. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's exactly how JSX works. So, yeah, it looks like text, but it smells a little bit different.
That's Rust syntax?
This is Rust syntax for you. Yeah. This is the graphical, again, specifically the graphical framework.
Is it a custom parser for you?
This HTML macro is part of the U library. That's what you're talking about. So this is probably going to create U components and for us.
You write your own parser, as a macro?
Yes. Yeah. Because a macro essentially is anything defined in Rust. The most direct definition of a macro, there's different forms of them, is anything that takes an abstract syntax tree and returns an abstract syntax tree. So they can do everything your code can do. And more. Because they can generate code, right? So at the very least, you can just make a macro that generates that code. So if you want to know like where that is founded, we would just do like, come up here and you would say HTML. And you can say, the macro implements JSX-like templates, right? So this is calling them by the same name that Josh just used and I would use. And then here's the macro right here. Function macro HTML. And what does this do? This is using the most difficult form of macro to create. It's called a token stream. This is doing exactly what I said. A token stream takes in an abstract syntax tree and it returns an abstract syntax tree. See? So there's a taking in an abstract syntax tree, there's a returning the abstract syntax tree. And what is it doing? It's calling this thing called parse macro input. And then it's converting the input to HTML root vnode. So parse macro input is going to be defined as that one, sin parse macro input. And why doesn't that work? There we go. Sin parse macro input. So you can see this is terrifying, but that's what it does. Sin is a parsing library for parsing a stream of Rust tokens into a syntax tree of Rust source code. Currently, this library is geared towards use in Rust procedural macros, but contains some APIs that may be more generally useful. So that's how you write a parser in a Rust macro using sin. And it's totally up to you how we spend time doing this. We could go through some of these macros if you guys want to play with the dragons, but if not, I think I'm just gonna go through the rest of the use stuff.
Sounds good to me, the use stuff.
Okay. So coming back over here, we have this value. We now know how this kind of thing works. We have a on click. Remember, the very last expression is what it's returning. This is returning a move closure that ignores the value it receives, and what it does is it takes this counter, moves it in, and adds 1 to it, and sets the value to that. That make sense? And that's what that closure is going to return. So now the closure has the value, and then we are calling it here. So this is essentially the same as writing this code down here and tying it to an on-click event. Now, here's a better question. When you have this inside of view and you just call it on-click, do you think this will work the same as this? Or is that specific?
So
The trait is not implemented for closure. So then the on-click part of that is part of the Rust state, part of the UAPI. So the UAPI is defining the thing the action on click. Rather than having a key and a value, on click equals this. You just call that on click elsewhere in your code, and it knows from the name. Does that make sense?
yeah, that's weird.
Yeah. So that's the kind of stuff. It's like high level magic, right? The fact that this is called on click is significant. It's not just a random name.
Yeah.
And it's actually telling it attach it to the on-click handle of JavaScript. So that's an actual JavaScript event called on-click.
Gotcha. That's very interesting.
On top, so
Yeah.
what if you rename the top one click first and recognize?
What if we rename what?
Rename the top one click something else? As you.
This one?
Yeah.
That's what we just tried.
No, keep the bottom on click.
Like that?
No, like in the first.
The other way around is what he's saying.
Yeah.
And then to rename let on click to Z.
Well, we'll know what to tie it to. Cannot find the value on-click in the scope. Now what you may be able to do is say something like this, on-click equals Z. I'm just saying that I'm bullshitting, but that may work. Missing value label for this property, trying to use shorthands to exploit identifiers may be used. So what is the non-shorthand syntax? On click equals that. Okay. So here you go. Now we're doing business. So here's how you would do it. You would say on click like this equals Z, like that.
Ah. That makes sense.
There you go.
So if you wanted to have multiple on click handlers in like a single component, that's how you do it.
Well, that's another good question. Can you have multiple unclick handlers? I don't think so. I don't
Well,
think.
not in a single, sorry, not in a single
Copy the
button,
div.
but in like, if you had
Copy
two
the-
buttons, let's
yeah.
say, and you want a different behavior for each button.
Like that?
Yeah, so if we had like a +5 now or something, if you wanted to make it make sense.
Well, I mean, that's not gonna work because the values move, but if we were to take it and we were to reference it, will this work?
That's not really long. That works.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you able to, integrate arches or SQLite into your source number?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely, yeah. There we go, so that's how that would work. Now, to answer your question, right, how would we make it to where we have one piece of code that uses custom amount of incrementation, right? So if we were to come up here and we were to call z add, like, I don't think there's any other z's except for that.
Yeah, you wouldn't really remake the whole on-click event, you just,
Now we have z, it's called add, right?
uh,
Now what I would do here is I would need to have something to return to this code block, right? So what I could do is I could say z add, and now what I wanted to do is I wanted to return here's what we could do. Function, what to add.
so I remember doing this, a while back. And it looks like I made an enum called message. That is add 1, add 10, subtract 1, subtract 10. And then,
But there is,
I do link.callback and then a closure for the message on each button within like the on-click in the HTML macro.
yeah, I think there's something you put, I think there's a better way to do this.
Okay.
What to add is gonna take this. Let's see here. This is what we had in there before, right? So to switch it around, it needs to take a variable and return that code block. No, it needs to take a variable and do this. There we go. That's it. It's that simple. Ah, okay. Now I can come down here and I can say here, add 5, add 10. I don't even think I need the dot clone anymore. Let's see if I don't need the dot clone anymore. Here we go. Add 1, add 10, add 5, add 10, add 1.
Sweet. Can we take a look at that code again?
Yeah. So now what I'm doing is I'm saying I created a function called add, and add takes a variable called what to add, which is of course just an integer, and it creates the counter just like before, except rather than adding 1, it adds what to add. So before add was essentially a code block, right? Which means that it's going to run that code and it's going to return the last thing in that code. Well, a function is just a code block that takes an argument.
Yeah.
So I could just take in an argument here, it's still gonna run all this code, it's still gonna return the closure right down here. and then boom, you're done.
Cool. And what caused it becoming a function means you didn't need to clone it anymore? Cause,
Right.
gotcha.
That's exactly right.
Because you're cloning. Wait, why do you use clone the original one?
The counter?
Because without the function block, what it's going to do is it's going to add is not going to have a stack frame. Because it doesn't have a stack frame, it has the same pointer to the same value each time. Right, so this is the problem here. If I go back to what I did there, like this, now I am moving, I have one copy of add, that one copy of add is taking the value, is getting the counter rather, and I am calling it multiple different times, which means that it has to own a copy of the mutable value, that variable. And that one code block can't be called multiple times in a mutating context, right? Because I'm trying to think of an easier way to explain this. It's one of those things that's hard to explain because you don't really think about it much.
It's still a function, right?
No, it's not a function. That's the problem. The problem is that this syntax is not a function.
It's a macro.
It's not a macro.
It's a code block.
It's a code block, right? So a code block doesn't have its own independent stack. It runs in the stack of whatever it contains it. A function has its own independent stack. So the problem here is that as a code block, you are moving the value here directly into this loop piece. When I make it a function, I'm closing over it. It has its own dedicated stack. I don't know how else to describe this.
Can you go back to the function?
Here's where it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work if that wasn't a copy type. If that was a clone type, that trick would not work.
Okay.
Then you'd have to clone the counter rather than moving it here. Yeah, so we're changing it to add, and then we can remove that clone. And then we have 1, 5, 10. Yeah, this is gotta say here.
You're just adding it, it turns into a function.
Yeah, exactly. Which means it's getting its own stack. Let's see. I'm trying to think of like why that. The answer is really I don't know how to explain it. I don't know why a function block that you can obviously call multiple times
Because they could be called in Carroll.
see this thing here, this is a function you're returning? This is a function you're returning. If you don't have it as a function block, and you just have it as a code block, right? If it's just a code block, this is gonna be the same every time. Do you understand that? Okay, so if I do this, right, then when I run add once, it's gonna return this, and then every copy of add is gonna be pointing to the same function body, right? Does that make sense? The same closure there, which is gonna close over the same value. That's impossible because you only have one value. Because that value is copied, when I do this, and I pass that value in, you're gonna get a different value every time, and it's just gonna transparently work. Because this is gonna be a different function every time, and it's gonna have a different V every time. So, as a function, If V is copy, this can be a different V every time. You don't have to worry about the borrow and the semantics. And counter, when it's in a code block form, is going to point to the same thing. That's where I'm having a hard time explaining. I'm having a hard time explaining it because why in a code block form does counter point to the same thing, and here it's pointing to different things? Oh, that's clear. That's clear. The answer is because a function is going to run every time you call it. This is going to return a function which returns a new move, which has a new counter. This is going to return a function which has a new move, which has a new counter. In the prior form, we had one copy of move. You can only use that one copy of move one place. So I'll put it to you like this. Here's how we can make the error happen again, right? Let's come down here and let's say add1 equals add. Right, boom. Now that is gonna, now I cannot take that, right, and put that here. That will work, right, but I can't put it here.
Okay.
There we go. Does that make sense?
Yes.
To show you the other side of this?
Yeah.
Does anyone want to take a crack at explaining this?
That's not, that one is not, it's a result, right?
What? Yes, it is the result of calling add1, which is going to return this closure. So why can't you call this closure twice? You can't call this specific closure twice because this specific closure is moving the value counter into it. But you can create multiple closures that move a read-only reference to count.
Okay.
There we go.
So you basically can't move counter twice. Gotcha. It's like
You
This is
can't
how-
have counter getting moved in and owned by multiple different, by one thing called multiple times.
Yeah.
But you can move it into multiple different things with a read-only reference, right, that don't own it.
Gotcha.
And why does it have to be owned? It has to be owned because you're calling it set. And it's not read-only because you're calling set. It's actually read-only. Let me see if I can say it a different way. Hold on. I think I'm coming closer to making a cogent explanation of this. This is bullshit.
If we were to use capital S string, then this wouldn't work either because it doesn't import a copy.
Yes. Because then you'd have to clone the counter here, or you'd have to clone the entire thing that returns it. You know what? Here's an easier way to explain this. I'm gonna try one more time with this.
Let's do
Okay,
it.
let's do it. Maybe this way it'll make sense. Eventually I will find a way to explain this. Very good question. That is very difficult to articulate. Up here we're saying we're creating a counter. Let counter equals counter.clone, right?
Yes.
That's the key. Okay. So because that is there, if I don't have this as a function and I have this code block, I'm going to have one copy of counter, right?
Yeah.
And every different move I have needs to have a mutable reference to that counter, right?
Yeah.
That one copy of counter. See how it's calling counter.set?
Yeah.
It needs to have a mutable reference to make counter.set happen. So that thing above is going to move counter into that closure,
Yep.
right? Now the problem is if I'm only doing that operation once, right? I can only have one copy of that closure.
Yeah.
I can't do this.
Yeah, because you only have one counter to close on.
Right, you only have one counter to close on because you've only cloned it once.
Yeah.
Now when I run it the other way with the add 10, I'm actually calling that let counter equals counter.clone every time.
Yeah.
Which is going to give me a different counter, which I can have a different mutable reference to.
Yeah. Makes sense.
There we go. So I think the actual complexity is here. This is why it works in function and it does not work in a code block. because the function is gonna run that piece of code every time when it generates that closure, and the code block is gonna run it once. That way it makes sense, right?
Yes. Looking.
Look, if I run this code, if I remove this, if I come down here and I run it like this, you're gonna run this code once, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And if I rename it to like this, then you're gonna run this code every time you call add with an argument, right? This code right here. You're gonna run that code every time you call add with an argument. It's the same thing here. If I do this, let's come up here and let's say let whatever equals this, and then I say println. This code is going to run once, right? This code right here is going to run once. Does that make sense?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Does that make, is that clicking for you?
It's not new.
I'm saying because it's a code block, whatever is going to run once. It's going to run that print line macro once, and it's going to return the value into whatever. It's only going to run it once. Now, if I make it a function, and I come up here and I say like this, let whatever equals this, now it's going to run it 0 times, but when I call it, it's going to run it 1 time every time I call it. So this is going to print once, this will print once, so on and so forth. So now I'm running it 4 times, and if I come over here and I remove these, I'm going to run that code 1 time. Right? So 1 time, 4 times. 1 time, 4 times. If I'm running the code 4 times, right, then I can create a different mutable variable every time. That's what this is doing. When I call this add and I take in a v, I'm going to run this counter every time. For the same reason I'm going to run the print line every time. So when I added all these down here, right, with these different add commands, this works because every one of these is calling that clone once, right? All of these call this code right here once. So that code gets called how many times? 3 times, because I have 3 different adds. When I put it in a code block, that code was only getting called once. So now I have 3 different counters, 1 counter, 2 counters, 3 counters. Before, when I had it as a code block, when I was doing this, I only had 1 counter. Now I have 1 counter. This only is going to get called once. It's a code block, not a function. So a code block isn't a function that takes 0 arguments. A code block runs and returns its results. It only ever runs once. A function that takes 0 arguments can be run multiple times. We created a function that takes 1 argument. And let me show it to you one other way here, just to make it full circle. This function takes 1 argument, and this all works, right? We've already demonstrated this works. I didn't change anything. It's still working. If I was to put it like this, right? And I was to remove these arguments, and I was to put the 1 back, so it compiles. This will not work because they're not running. And what you could do, yes, here. If I was to make it an empty function, like this, and I was to call it each time, this would work. Boom. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Did that make it click? So even though they take no arguments because it's a function, this one is going to have a different cloned copy of the counter every time. Right? And if I remove that and I go back, now I have 1 copy of the counter and it will not run. There we go. That explanation I'm the most satisfied with. I think that one there should make it very clear how it's actually working. Okay, add 1, 5, 10. And we have, this is V. And this is V. Okay. You ready to go to the next one?
Sure. I had a question real quick though, maybe it won't be too quick, but we'll see. Have you ever worked with, rather than like a functional component like this, it looks like you can just implement component on like a struct?
Yes, yes I have.
Yeah.
So the reason why I did that is because that's the beauty of this framework, really.
Yeah.
The beauty of this framework isn't the simple shit. The beauty of the framework is that stuff. And the reason why that's really beautiful is because you can take a row that you get back from the database, like a query, right? And you can tell the row how to visualize itself in HTML by implementing those traits that say this is the HTML for it, right? Then you don't have to write any additional code. That's the ideal. The ideal is that you make your application work transparently with HTML by implementing these raw traits on them.
Yeah. And
that's a theme in Rust everywhere. I'll give you another example that's really useful. I use something called Rust-Postgres or -PG. It's the simplest form of a Rust interface to Postgres. And it's the most powerful form too. It requires the most knowledge of Postgres to really use that. But one of the beauties of it is that you can implement a mechanism that can take your structs into SQL, right? So you can implement something like toSQL, and then you can take that struct, change it internally, call toSQL on it, know you're going to get back the SQL that you just need to provide to the executor, and have it insert or update.
Yeah.
So you can write things that allow you to take your struct to a SQL. You can write things that allow you to take your struct to HTML. You write things that allow you to take your struct to Serde and then automatically get JSON and XML from them. That theme of how do I get my thing, my data object, into another form, right? That is called mapping in a functional language. And that's how all of this stuff works under that.
So then your code is just like .toSQL .update, and then your or .insert or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I would actually just literally write, like database and then .find vehicle, where I implement the find vehicle or find vehicle by ID. I don't use ORM, so I implement that all by hand because it takes me 1 second, right? And then it's going to populate my own struct with my own code, and then I can literally take that code and dump it here, just like you're seeing inside the curly bracket, and it'll know how to display it inside of you. We can do that. You want to write some code like that?
Sure.
But normally, the query would take like 15, 30 seconds. The whole web app would just freeze while it's happening.
Nothing takes 15 or 30 seconds in Postgres and Rust. I mean, if you have
It's
really...
query depth computation. So you normally want to do that in I think you would have to speak, then the struct wouldn't make much sense, because you're going to have to message transform it to JSON and passing it from the message passing from the worker to
I mean, if you're determined to have this thing run client side, sure. But I mean, in the amount of time it takes you to send 100 megabyte database to the client, you could run 50,000 queries, right? So the question is, why would you want to send the data to the client? I'm not saying you have to. Your app very well may have a need for that, but mine don't. I don't ever send all of mine. I mean, like the idea that what you're doing is antithetical to any method I would use to design a database. I would not ever send a SQL database to a client. And I've never worked at a company that ever did that. And I'm not saying there's no use cases for it. It's part of the HTML spec for a reason, because people have that need. But when you browse Facebook, you get a SQL database dump of anything?
For example, one example would be Amazon e-commerce site. They're doing shopping cart. You're putting things in your shopping cart and watch this and that. Writing all that, the business code for storing all those items, and keeping track of orders and all that stuff in pure JavaScript it's really spaghetti. It would be simpler if you could just store your shopping cart as a SQLite database on the client side. Then when you add an item to your shopping cart, all you do is run a SQL query to add the item to the shopping cart table. on your thing. It's greatly simplifies the code for shopping.
I mean, I've used local storage before, which has SQLite, you know, and I've used these types of things. I'm just saying, you know, by and large, when you're looking at shopping cart implementations, I find that the vast majority of them are not written to use SQLite. And D&D games, RPGs, like a lot of them do lots of statistical tables and dice rolls. Do you want to? that is a use case where I think SQLite makes sense.
You can just simplify it as a SQLite and then run SQL queries instead of trying to write all in JavaScript.
I think that application makes a lot more sense, right? Because in that case, you may be running 20,000 queries a minute, you know, rather than 10.
Yeah, like Battletech game.
Yeah.
Like there's a release of Battletech game back in 2018 or 2016. It runs so slow because it's all the tables are in JSON, and it has to it takes a huge amount of time to import the JSON files into it caches them, but every once in a while when there's no cache, it has to re-import the JSON file physically from the disk into the game engine, and then run the dice rolls and all the whole thing. But if you could just store all of it, it's like 100 several hundred megabytes worth of JSON. You could just store it all in the game in memory as a SQLite database. Just pull it up.
It makes sense in that case, you know? I'm just saying, like, by and large, what makes even more sense is not sending your client a 100 megabyte database, as you need to. So there's cases where that's needed, and there's cases where that's absolutely
If you need to visualize you need to visualize, like, say 5,000 data points on a SVG campus or something like that. And those data points, you have to do a bunch of joins as well. You have to like normalize, like say, you have like 20 stocks or 100 stocks over graph, plotted over historical period over 10 years from data. And you want to know, but before you plot it, you have to normalize them all. So that they're all, so like a $100 stock and a $5 stock, they're not like you have to normalize it like that. You have to do all of that in SQL first. But you get the raw data set as a SQLite database. And then once it's in your client, you run a bunch of SQL queries to normalize it.
I understand your point. I'm just saying, like, the reality, let me ask you this. Would you grant me that for very small data sets, it doesn't make sense to send the data set to the client?
No.
Like that? Okay. Would you also grant me that for very large data sets, you cannot send the data to the client?
For mediums, yes, you would.
Okay, so there's a area in which I agree, you're talking about something that makes sense, a medium-sized database for some workloads where you're doing heavy amount of analyzing, right? And you're doing a low amount of input-output from external logs. The data set is otherwise fixed.
Yeah.
That workflow may make sense, but the vast majority of use cases don't fit in that workflow. I mean, if you're talking about something like viewing a large amount of data, I mean, if you're using PostGIS, like I use PostGIS, right? And that's how I use like all my geospatial queries. It's my bread and butter. I do geospatial stuff. If you're doing PostGIS, your data set may very well be, let's say, 10 gigabytes, right? Just to have all of the line files for the city of Houston and Texas, you know, and to have the shape files for where the buildings are at. There is no way you're going to cut any sizable percentage of that up and send it to the client. So what we do is you suggest a Mapbox area, and you send the Mapbox to the client. It doesn't make a difference who you are. Like if you go down here to Waze, right?
So you're way to like serialize the Mapbox area into like one data set.
I know you're really stuck on the whole SQLite thing. I'm just telling you, like if you go down here to Waze and you look at how they're doing it, you look at the network traffic, here's how it looks, right? This is the TGO RSS, right? So now I work with this company. These are big companies like Google, right? This is owned by Google now. And you look here, this is the data set thing. And that's how they're sending back the data for what you're looking at. It's just one big JSON string of data, and look how long it is. I'm not saying this is the best way to do it. I'm just saying the idea here is that the user takes a slice of data, and that slice of data is what is actually sent to the client. That represents what you're seeing as far as traffic. And the main reason for that is because it's easy to send all of these streets as tiles, and then all of these little things as data points on the tiles. But it would be remarkably complex to dump Waze's data set,
Okay.
you know?
When you're doing these, can you like add waypoints and things like that?
Certainly, I mean, if I log in, I don't have to log into
Would
it.
it be would it, instead of having when you add a waypoint and remove waypoints, and have to send,
You send an
It says-
update
it
string to
says-
them, you send an update string to them, which has the JSON and the new location with the unique identifier, then they send the download string back to you for the new data set. I'm just saying, this is a gigantic everyone's like this, right? The penetration for using SQL is much more so for like video games, like you're talking about, using SQL like video games. You generally speaking don't ship a 100 megabyte SQLite file to users, that's a huge thing.
can you type the URL in?
Sure. What?
Kai is KAIZHU. 256, ZHU, 256, you put an I, slash, SQL, and MATH.
Okay.
So this is visualization from a 2020.
Sure. And what would it cost to have this visualization sent if it was generated on the server and it was pushed back to a user as points?
It would require like several API calls and a bunch of extra coding. But all of the stuff, it's generated from, click on the one. It's all generated, just the SQL editor. Yeah, it's all generated from the SQL code.
Sure, I understand. This is a perfectly fine workflow. I'm just telling you, it's not one that we tend to adopt, because sending 100 gigabyte or 100 megabyte, file to users in the browser to generate this visualization is a lot more complex for the browser, and it's a lot more traffic to send to them than just generating it on the server and giving them the result of the query.
Not if you have it's easy. It's better if the user, instead of the user creating a sprint ticket every time they need a new visualization, and us having to rewrite code in the query on the server, they could just simply enter the query themselves into the editor to visualize it. They don't have to. They can do it themselves. They don't need.
Yeah, but no one knows how to use this, right? That's not the argument. No one knows how to use SQL. I mean, none of your users are ever going to know how to use SQL. So the value of SQL is to you as a developer, it's not to your users.
I would argue that it's actually for the non-developers. There's non-developers can use SQL.
I think we're just totally on different planets, and that's totally fine, If you're making money doing this, I'm making money doing the other thing, and the world is a great place, I don't have much else to add.
How often is your data updating? It says like 5 minutes ago.
Every 30 minutes.
Could you not just generate this chart every 30 minutes and have a cached version that you just throw back to your users, or you want them to be able to change it?
No. This chart is dynamically generated from SQL queries. It's not a hard coded chart.
Okay.
So if you want to, if instead of visualizing, say, it's visualizing a bunch of stock prices. Instead of that, I want to create a bar chart of all the, click on the centers on the left hand. Okay. The last one. Just scroll down. Just keep scrolling.
Where am I scrolling? I don't understand. So you mean in the middle?
Right above SQL query results. Scroll. See, all of these charts, they're not hard coded. In the code. They're all dynamically generated from writing your SQL query. If the user wants a different visualization of something else, they don't have to ask you to do something for them. They can just simply, as long as they know how to write SQL, they can generate their own chart.
But the only question, that's totally fine.
So as a developer, I don't have to do any of the query stuff generation. All I do is I just give them the data dump.
I understand. I'm just saying, other companies out there that even if they need dynamic query generation, They either provide a query builder for them, or they accept a query and they generate it on the server. The workflow in which you send the data, rather than they send you the query, is not very well adopted.
Yeah, okay, I'll agree with you, it's not very well done.
Yeah.
But it's.
Like,
yeah,
use Wikipedia, right?
But that's what I'm interested in.
Sure.
Just provide the raw data block, and the user themselves can figure out how to do it, how to create meaningful visualization.
And this will not scale, right? And that's another problem. Like, you know that there's going to be a certain point where this system that you built will have to get away from it. Like, if you want to run a query that does a visualization that's, let's say, 5 years of data, right?
This is 10 years. Oh, yeah, what is this, 5 years?
This is 5 years, okay, let's say 30 years then.
Yeah.
What are you gonna, you're gonna send now a database that's 6 times larger, they're gonna get a 600 meg database?
Well, you constrain them on what they can query for. But the idea is still, yeah, you just give them a raw data bit. You give them a raw data dump.
Well, let me show you something else. Let me show you another idea here, right? Like, just to show you another one that I work on. There's OpenStreetMaps, right? What's fun? Drugs and strippers, right? So we'll look for, no, I don't know, nightclub. We'll keep it work appropriate here. Actually, no, let's use something else, just because I'm feeling weak everyone out here. We're gonna use OpenStreet, there we go, strip clubs, right? So if I come down here, you're gonna see the link here, Overpass Turbo, right? If I click on Overpass Turbo, it's gonna take you to a query generator, just like the one that you're talking about. And I can zoom out to Houston, right, like this, and then I can go run. You're gonna send the query to them, they're gonna send you back the result for the visualization, and there's an arbitrary query showing you all the strip clubs in Houston. You know, this workflow is relatively popular. The same thing too with, like, if you go to like Stack Exchange, Stack Explorer. The Stack Exchange Data Explorer. You want to run something like that, how many upvotes do I have for each tag? This one accepts direct SQL, and you can go run query right down here, and I give it a user ID like 1, that's, or whatever, I don't know what the user ID is. Why am I, okay, maybe why I do these things. Motorcycle. Next. How many users?
Traffic light. Alright,
Next.
we got it.
Things all will fetch your results. Now, I'd argue that this one is slow because it's Microsoft, needlessly so. But I mean, here's another example where, and of course, I pick a user that doesn't exist or something. But let's just see here, Stack Overflow. Pick my user that doesn't exist.
124486 is yours.
There we go. So, I mean, there's an ability to run SQL, but of course, like the execution engine here, they don't send you back all of the data in a SQLite dump. You know, you send them the query, they send you back the result. And for like another last example I would do would be something like,
I'm sorry, it's not popular because people couldn't run SQL queries in their browser.
It's not.
As a SQL, it wasn't possible until recently.
years, people that would do it.
No,
I'm just saying.
I mean, running WebAssembly, SQL, the data dumps, in the browser, it's only recently that's been possible.
The world could change. I'm just saying, like, the marketing case for this is going to be data sets that are small enough to fit in the browser. And even on those data sets that are small enough to fit in the browser, you're going to have a very high barrier to want to send your users 100 megs of anything, rather than just simply having them sending you a 1 kilobyte query, you sending them a 1 kilobyte response. That whole process, round trip, takes less than 10 milliseconds. But yes.
Well, yeah, just moving on.
Yeah. I think the game example is the one place where that's so what else do we want to do here? We want to
We're talking about implementing
the visualization stuff on our own structs, right? So let's create a struct. struct, we'll call this Josh, and I'm gonna say here, age, let's do the struct person, age, 52, actually, just say you, and no one's gonna live that long, so age, name, string, okay, let's keep it simple like that. And then let's come down here into the app, and then I'm gonna say here, let Josh equals new person. And, or here, I don't think we need, in here. Age 26.
You got it right.
Boom. Okay, now I have a person object for you. Now, if I come down here and I wanna return that person, I would put it like this, and this is not gonna work.
Needs to be inside the div, right?
Yeah, because we have one read element, but it's still not gonna work.
It doesn't know how to turn it into HTML.
Actually.
There's no view trait, or view function from the component trait.
Yes, person cannot be formatted with the default format required by a bound and produced by this call. The trait SC format display is not implemented for person. But look here, this is the vnode for person, and it has to implement into vnode.
Okay.
So what I want to do is implement this. So what we're going to do is go into vnode.
Can you look up the component trait real quick?
The component trait, yes. Don't see this trait, okay.
Yeah, this is what I would look at, because it gives you a bunch of methods to implement.
Cool. So let's do that. Required methods, create and view. So let's implement that. And then what is create? All of the component is create. So we're going to come down here in IMPL, view HTML component for person. And then we need to have create, which is going to take a context and return a cell. And then view. And then this is going to use the HTML map, right? And what it's going to do is it's going to go self name. I think this is how this works. And then age, self age. Missing field name, an initializer of person, missing name. Oh. That's
There's no colon after name?
expected or valid HTML.
So, remember how this,
Yeah.
yeah. I think I have one too many curlies on each. And it's saying we don't have all the traits implemented.
Missing messaging properties. Messengers used to make components dynamic and interactive. Some components can declare their messages to be blank. Component complexity commonly uses an enum to declare multiple message types. I don't need this thing to react, so I'm just going to say the type message.
Yeah, and on this example I did a while back, I made an enum called message in set type message equal MSG. And I did an empty tuple for properties.
So you got it working.
This was a while ago though, so I just kind of, I don't really feel like I remember it, so.
So why did this work? It says here, Josh, person cannot be formatted with the default formatter required by a bound introduced in this call. No, required for vnode person to implement into vnode. Okay. So does the person implement into vnode? Did I not do that? Why does this?
Well, so this is a component now, right? Like we made Destruct into a component.
Right.
So couldn't we just say person in the, so forget Josh for now. Just type like a person as if, you know, like it's a component that we need to pass like, one second. Yeah, like, do like the tag, so like, open, yeah, person, and just delete Josh for now.
I see what you're saying. That's a little more.
Well, we need to close the tag properly, is the, and then now it's complaining that that's just plain text. And we don't have it in quotes and curly braces, like string literal, or string slice.
You mean this?
The Josh, yeah. I don't think Josh here at all, maybe, but yeah, it doesn't like children, so.
I'm confused at this point. Missing mismatched closing tags.
So
person.
now if you just put a slash right before the last arrow, that'll compile.
Okay. So what is that going to generate?
Maybe it doesn't compile. Okay.
Self-name move do this method. Move occurs because self-name has that string. Okay, so then come up here and then I can say name equals self.name.phone.
And then UA influence copy, so we don't need to do it for age, correct?
Yes. You might have meant the available field self. You might have, oh, here, let. Okay, that's gonna work.
Thank you.
Oh, what is it gonna do though?
It's gonna say no one.
No one age.
So now we need to figure out how to pass props to that component. Right?
So that makes sense. So then why can't I just create Josh and send it to it? So I create person and then equals Josh. Is this how it works?
I don't think so. Oh, okay, here. Let's see. Oh man, it's 8:52. Time flies when you're learning new. Oh, so we need to do something with type properties.
Yeah, wait, where do you mean, oh, properties up there?
Yeah. So,
The component's properties, when the parent of a component is re-rendered, it will either be recreated or receive new properties in the context passed with a changed lifestyle method. Let's just see here, you example.
yeah, that might be
Right?
better.
There we go. Okay. This is a lot easier. All right. So, when they're doing their implementation, they're doing struct prop, component with prop, takes properties, returns HTML. Oh, here you go. User first name, user last name.
And then they set it up in props up there.
Well, let's just try this then, right? It should say here name equals Josh.
Closing slash. So I think we're gonna have to edit the implementation and properties at some point. Let's see, where is it? Oh, this is doing it with function components, not trait components.
So what are function components, huh? Smart guy?
So function components is, I mean, where we have that, I forget the rusty name for it, but I just call it a decorator all the time for some reason. What would be the rusty name for like the pound
This
open
is what
bracket?
they're doing.
function?
They're writing properties. Right? So that probably works.
Okay, so if we put properties on,
You're right. That's a little.
attributes, that's what it's called.
I still don't get it, I'm sorry. We derive properties.
I think we have
Method
to,
not found in empty folder.
I think this is like I don't know how much like, and you're more Angular than React, but like, I know, and this is kind of before my time in React too, but there used to be like, everything was done with class components in React. And then there was like the move over to functional components, and we had, you know, like use state hooks and all that good stuff. And I think this is kind of like the equivalent of a class component from React, putting it into those terms.
I just wanna see where's the example of this?
Yeah.
Properties, partial F, type builder, self-builder, those not used to describe properties. So if I just say that the properties equal self, would that work? That worked,
The properties self, really? Okay. So now we need to try and pass in those properties and see if that works. We might need to edit the create method as well to use those properties.
How?
Maybe we can get it from context. So I guess.
So context is let person equals
Oh, so CTX.props then? So maybe like, without even defining a new variable in self, could we do self age colon CTX.props.age?
I'm sorry, say it again?
So you delete the line where we're and then go to the next line, and then where it says age colon 0, replace 0 with CTX.props.age. And same for name.
Private field. But that may just be because, why can't I get this? That may be because I have to call it that.
Cannot be unrestricted. Maybe functional components are there for a reason.
Let's try this. Let person, let P equals, person, and then well, this one. They're not even reloaded yet?
Because it's still saying no one, and we totally deleted that. No?
Let's just check this out. Implement.
This was a rabbit hole. I feel like functional components are
Yeah, but this is almost entertaining.
Yeah.
I mean, it shouldn't be that freaking ridiculously hard. But let's see if, I mean, like, let's try this. Is there implement component for app? There we go. Here.
Okay, this is literally what I have. This is what I was running off of a while back. I have a very similar example of this. But I want an example where it shows how to use properties.
Or how to use context. None of these things use context, right?
Okay, CTX.link.
This one does, but none of them use the properties.
Let's see, let me look at my example again. Yeah, mine's just using CTX.link.
Okay, so the next thing that we can do is we can go to GitHub and look at view.
Just like look at different people using.
No, and look at examples. And then there should probably be hopefully something.
You can search for like impl component.
Yeah.
I think some people are implementing or importing the U prelude component instead of UHTML component as well. So you might.
We're also doing that.
Okay.
Immutable example. So they're deriving properties in parallel loop when they're using the function component again. which is really simple. Geez, a function component, you just give it the view.
Yeah. I wonder what function component's doing under the hood. I bet it's implementing all the stuff we're talking about.
That's probably a really good idea there. I like that. Yes, let's just look at what function component is doing under the hood. That's a cool idea. I don't know why that thing doesn't work the first time.
That's amazing.
Function component. So they said properties equals the properties. Well, this is Black Dragons.
Yeah. Oh.
Let's roll. That's a hard one, man.